Alpha Tauri will be no more. It's a sprint weekend. Pole position is going to be mighty, mighty tight. And how does the cost cap work? Welcome. Let's go racing.
They exist in a world beyond ours. This is Formula One.
It is a very good evening and welcome to the LGR F1 Show, brought to you by our wonderful friends at Suzuki as well as the Penta Motor Group, and we are live from our bespoke studio in the Menlyn Shopping Centre where you can come and buy your wonderful Suzukis. Speaking of which, I actually was in the game reserve in my little Suzuki Swift and it was outstanding. Now, for those of you who look very, very carefully, we're going to go to the wide shot. Just behind me over here, you can see it says 2022 calendar. Did you notice that? Well, now you have. Well, that is all part of our legends kind of wall behind me. As you can see, we've got all of the magnificent helmets from many, many drivers of past. And then, of course, well, we just got an older calendar. So don't get confused, because as you can see, Russia's on there, and we know that there's no Russian Grand Prix. Anyway, this weekend, we are going to the home of a Red Bull in Spielberg, Austria. It is going to be a sea of orange. Yet again, there are going to be flares going off. It is going to be a majestic Grand Prix. You do not want to miss it. And of course, we do have a sprint race as well. There has been a lot going on in the world of Formula One. As always, you can get in touch with me via our Facebook page, YouTube, and our WhatsApp. There we go, it's on your screen. That is the number. You want to send any questions, any queries, anything you want to know about the world of Formula One, use the WhatsApp line. And of course, if you want to join the group, just tell me and I'll add you onto the group as well. There has been a lot going on. Let's catch up after this. Must ask him for a test drive of that new Vitara. Okay, the world of Formula One. He resurrected Wrexham Football Club. He is one of the coolest actors in the world. He's married to one of the most beautiful women in the world. Man, and he is a serious entrepreneur and a very, very clever man. I'm talking about Ryan Reynolds. Yes, Ryan Reynolds and two others have created a consortium and have bought 24% of Alpine. When I first heard this, I went, what's going on? Alpine is Renault. Renault, why would they sell out? Or why would they sell a part of it? Well, it's a cash injection, and also it increases the value of what Formula One teams are worth. It is surmised at the moment that even the weakest Formula One team in Formula One at the moment, which is Williams, is estimated to have a value of about $1 billion. Now, if we zoom in a little bit closer onto this diagram, you can see there, the valuation, Racing Point was bought for roughly 100 million. Mercedes bought the BAR team for 170 odd million. Williams were bought out by Dollarton Capital for 200 million. Sauber just recently have been bought out by Audi for 600 million. McLaren up there at 700 million. And now we have an estimate, if we go out on this, that Alpine, its value at the moment is roughly $900 million. At the 24%, I'm not entirely sure how much say they have when it comes to decision making. However, Ryan Reynolds definitely knows a good thing, and his investment there might attract a whole bunch of other people to get involved in the world of Formula One. Very interesting times. Now, let's go back a little bit to Canada. Did anybody get closer to Red Bull in Canada? Well, you've got to believe so. If we look at what happened, Max won. He was only 10 seconds ahead of Fernando Alonso. And if you look at the previous 8 races or 7 races before this, the gap between Max Verstappen and anybody else was roughly in the 20 to 30 seconds. Was it the characteristics of the track, the wet, dry elements? I would just have to say that Fernando Alonso pushed Max as much as he could. You've got to believe that the upgrades that were brought by Aston Martin definitely worked. Lewis Hamilton also in a very, very good position. Mercedes really beginning to find some incredible form with their upgrades as well. And don't discount Ferrari. Ferrari had a troubled qualifying. Leclerc didn't even make it into out of Q2. That was problematic. But in their race pace, they were very, very quick. Unfortunately, we never saw the fruits, or they never saw the fruits of it, because they were stuck too far on the grid. So is the gap closing? We all hope so. We don't know. This weekend, we've got a completely different kind of circuit than what we had in Canada, but we will hopefully wait and see to see whether or not anybody is getting closer. And there are teams that are coming with a lot of upgrades this weekend as well. But what about the gap, and who is doing what about trying to close that gap? Aston Martin basically come out and they said they believe the key to everything that Red Bull have is in the DRS. They believe the rest of their package, Aston Martin, is superb. All they want to try and do now is harness and understand how that DRS in the Red Bull works, and if they can get that going in the Aston Martin, then I think they're going to be a lot closer as well. We might see Alonso for a win. Do you think so? I don't know. He does have a target, which when I read this, I was a little bit concerned about what Fernando Alonso basically is saying. And he's basically saying, well, our target is to get second in the championship and try and score as many points as possible. And I'm going, Fernando, surely you should be sitting and saying, come on, let's get a win. Let's get a couple of wins. Let's try and beat Red Bull, as opposed to just trying to accumulate a lot of points, which of course they want to do. But you've got to believe Alonso is very, very close to getting that win that he hasn't had for many, many years. Another team that seems to be pushing very, very hard, we saw it in Canada as well, and that of course is Mercedes. You cannot leave Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton has come out and said he understands what Mercedes have to do going forward for this season, but he says specifically for 2024. So will Mercedes abandon 2023 and focus now on 2024? Lewis Hamilton says downforce. Okay, and there we go. So his characteristics basically are defined by one word, and that is downforce. A little later, we're going to talk about the cost cap, and this might be affecting everybody's development going forward. They would have all had a plan for this year as to where they want to bring their certain upgrades. However, with Red Bull starting off so incredibly meteoric, the other teams are now having to pull and push those developments much sooner than they expected in order to try and close the gap to Red Bull. But eventually, we're going to get to a point this season where all of the teams have brought all of their upgrades, and that is going to be the status quo going forward, purely because of the budget cap, which we will talk out a little bit later. This weekend, a team that didn't have a great Canadian Grand Prix, and they, let's be honest, they've had a struggle during 2023 so far. But McLaren are coming to Austria with a whole heap of upgrades. And Lando Norris has come out and said he's really, really looking forward to what they have. It's the first stage of their upgrade program. It's finally coming to the track. I have firm belief in Andrea Stella and his team at McLaren. And we know what a brilliant, brilliant racing driver Lando Norris is. Oscar Piastri is not doing too bad in his first season as well. But McLaren, hopefully, going to start finding something and getting themselves solidly into Q3 when it comes to qualifying, and also into the top positions for scoring points. Now, coming up, yes, Alpha Tauri will be no more. And I'll look at the cost cap. Welcome back, everybody. Live, it is the LGR F1 Show, live from the Menlyn Shopping Centre, our Suzuki bespoke pop-up store. If you're in the area, come by and, well, just come and say hello. A lot of fun. Alpha Tauri will be no more. Now, we have to go back in time, number one, to understand. Red Bull Racing came into Formula One, and then they created their second team, Toro Rosso, which originally was the Minardi team. They are based in Faenza in Italy and basically run independently of Red Bull. And they were Toro Rosso. They achieved something extraordinary, where Toro Rosso was the first of the Red Bull teams to ever win a Formula One race. Do you remember that? Sebastian Vettel. And Toro Rosso nearly became the top team of the Red Bull stable. However, it didn't. Red Bull created and developed whatever they did over the years, and of course multiple champions with Sebastian Vettel, and now with Max Verstappen, and Alpha Tauri sitting at the moment at the bottom of the table, which is unlike something that we would expect from Alpha Tauri. Yes, we've got problems with Nick de Vries, or let's put it this way, Christian Horner has got problems with Nick de Vries, and Nick de Vries hasn't really stepped up to the plate so far this year. Yuki Tsunoda, I think, is doing a fantastic job within that team. But the chiefs at Red Bull, and for those who maybe don't know, Alpha Tauri is a fashion brand of Red Bull. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to have done as well as they expected it to do in terms of the fashion world. And sponsoring a Formula One team is not a cheap exercise. So, Alpha Tauri next year will still be owned by Red Bull. So let's just put that in. It is going to have new sponsors, new management. Of course, we know that, his name will come up now. Did I get it? Yes, Laurent Mekies. Of course, he's the technical director at Ferrari. He's going to be their new leader. Peter Mayer is going to be joining them as well. And they're going to be more based in the UK. And they're going to have a new sponsor. Does that mean they're going to have new drivers? Perhaps so. The person I fear most for, because I don't, unless Nick de Vries does something heroic over the next couple of races, unfortunately, I don't think he will be there. But Yuki Tsunoda came with so much promise, and he also came with a lot of the Honda backing. Now that we know that Aston Martin have done a deal with Honda going into 2026, where does this leave Yuki Tsunoda? And that is the billion-dollar question. I'm sure more details will be revealed as the months go on, but Alpha Tauri will be called something different next year. Maybe Red Bull Junior, nobody knows. We don't know at this stage, but that is going to change. Now, the cost cap. How does this work? Let's first look at Red Bull and their development going forward. Last year, Red Bull were found to be in breach of exceeding their expenditure in the cost cap. It is not as simple as just saying, Well, you only have $145 million, and now you spent $146 million. Slap on the wrist, no wind tunnel, test time for you, and that's how it works. The cost cap is, at present, a living entity. There are things, there are loopholes all over the place, and of course, just like in any kind of sport where you find a loophole, you manipulate it as much as possible until they try and close those loopholes. So I believe that we still got a couple of years until we find a precise cost cap that works for everybody else. However, Red Bull have come out and said that their development for their 2024 car will be hindered because of the cost cap penalty that they incurred from last year, which was something like $7 million and also a lack of wind tunnel test time. This cost cap was brought in to try and bring all of the teams closer together. And, well, it worked in 2021, and all of a sudden we've got this massive gap in 2022. But that's more in regulations as opposed to the cost cap. The other thing is, how does it work? And the best thing was the comment that came out from James Allison and also Otmar Zafnauer. And there we go. It's way too early to judge the cost cap impact. And Otmar Zafnauer came out and said exactly what I was saying. There are loopholes, and the reason that the only reason to close them is so that the playing field is level. And once we have that level playing field, and those who have more financial ability can't spend it, then we'll get the field a little bit closer. It's good for the fans, it's good for the sport, it's good for Formula One, but it is still a work in progress. How does this affect everybody else? I'll tell you where it affects everybody else, and that is one simple term: capital expenditure. Okay, if you sit there and think of a guy like James Vowles, who has gone to the Williams team now, he has spent most of his Formula One career at Mercedes. He's seen what kind of infrastructure they have, how they have developed over the years, and now all of a sudden he goes to Williams. He has come out and said, cost cap is fine. You know, 145, 146 million for everybody to spend, that's all great. The problem is that initial capital expenditure that Ferrari, Red Bull, McLaren have used over all of the years to get the right components set up for them to develop their car is something that other smaller teams cannot now go and find and spend. For example, he came out and said that Mercedes have up to $300 million worth of components that Williams don't have. Now, because of the cost cap, you have a problem where, yes, we could spend $145 million, but if we want to try and get to where Mercedes are, we're going to have to spend the next 15 years to make up the $300 million deficit that we don't have. That's where the big issue is. And this led me to think about, how is this going to affect Audi? Because I sat and went, well, Audi surely must be sitting, you know, back in Germany and going, okay, we need this, etc., and now let's build this all up and get ready for Formula One. It doesn't work that way. They have bought the Sauber team, and they have to be within compliance of the cost cap rules as well. So they've got to look at what Sauber have, and over the next 2 or 3 years, try and invest money, part of the cost cap, in order to upgrade certain facilities, but that comes out of their cost cap. So anybody expecting Audi to come in 2026 and just blow everyone out of the water, I don't think it is going to be that easy to achieve. So the cost cap, very, very complicated, but if we try and just think of it as something that is a work in progress and that it is moving all of the time and it is living, eventually we will find some kind of structure, and hopefully that is before 2026. Sure, information overload. I think, you know, let's just breathe a little. Guess who's arrived? The magnificent Eva Green, in green, just coming to delight our screens just for a couple of moments. All right, enough of that. It's sprint weekend. It's going to be a sea of orange. Up next, the Red Bull Ring. Welcome back this weekend. It is the Austrian Grand Prix at the magnificent Red Bull Ring, which used to be called the Österreich Ring, but then the late Dietrich Mateschitz bought it and turned it into the Red Bull Ring. I haven't been there as yet, but it looks like an atmosphere second to none. However, there I spoke about Nick de Vries, and he's a man under pressure. Another man who's under a little bit of pressure, of course, is Logan Sargent. He's the second driver at Williams. It is his first season in Formula One. He hasn't been close enough to Alexander Albon at all, which then offers the question, well, let's just look at what he says. Logan Sargent does have memories, so he knows it. He knows it's going to be fun. He knows it's going to be exciting. I want to talk a little bit about Alexander Albon. Alexander Albon, as we all know, unfortunately got bombed by Red Bull Racing unceremoniously, as Helmut Marko does. But this kid is dynamic, and you've got to believe that Helmut Marko, Christian Horner are looking to sit there and say, Sergio Perez, you've done fantastically for us. Don't know if you, with the team for next year, bring back Alexander Albon to team up with Max Verstappen again. Could be. You know, we've seen Red Bull do this in the past as well. So Alex Albon, definitely a man to watch, not only for Red Bull, but I think for any other top team. The guy is just out of this world. He is fantastic. This weekend, it is a sprint race weekend. It is the second of the season. Last year at the sprint race, it was Max Verstappen who actually won the sprint race, but in the race itself, it was a little bit different. Should be quite a lot of fun. We'll get into the weather and those things in a short while, and I'll give you a full schedule of the sprint race weekend. But it will be a sea of orange, and this is what we can expect. Just look how spectacular that Red Bull Ring is with that huge bull. Yeah, I mean, if you think Zandvoort's got a lot of orange, I think the Red Bull Ring has just as much. Tires and weather, as always, will be a factor around all of our circuits. Speaking of tires, Pirelli, we know, have a contract until 2026. Apparently, Bridgestone have put up their hand to say, we would like to put in a bid to maybe take over the tire compounds from 2026. That's a story for another day. Of course, Bridgestone had tremendous success back in the early 2000s as well. Pirelli will come this weekend. We've got the C3, the C4, and the C5, which are the softest of all three of the compounds that'll be run. It's 71 laps. It is probably, I think, besides Monaco, the shortest circuit on the calendar. But it is, oh man, it's just a tremendous amount of fun. One thing that I think is going to be extremely close, because the track is so short, is going to be the fight for pole position. And we must remember, because of sprint race, we have pole position that runs on the Friday as opposed to the Saturday. So weather is definitely going to be something to watch out for. Short lap, there we go. Could be anything up to a couple of hundredths of a second when it comes to pole position. And do we need pole position? Of course. Anybody on pole position leads from the front. If they can get into turn one, from there they could have a chance of upsetting the Red Bull apple cart. So let's have a look at our circuit, which is just magnificent. We've got the DRS zones. We've got 3 of them. It's a very, very short track, but you just cannot believe the speeds that these guys go through. Turn 3, a wonderful place for overtaking. We've seen some great overtaking through turn 8 as well. So, sure, turn 1, of course, there should be a lot of overtaking. Turn 4, also a place where we can overtake. Last year, we saw some incredible racing at the Red Bull Ring, and I'll talk about that just in a short while. I'm just hoping that we can have something very, very similar this weekend as well. Weather-wise, well, Canada, we had a little bit of rain. Could we have a little bit of rain this weekend in Austria? Anything can happen. However, the forecast is that there could be some rain for FP1 and qualifying. That is for tomorrow. On Saturday, there's an 80% chance of rain, possible thunder showers. That could be for the sprint shootout as well. However, on Sunday, they're saying the chance of rain is only 20%. Now, that's how you read it in one way, and then somebody posts graphics like this, and you go, oh my word, it's going to rain on Sunday. No, they reckon maybe only 20% chance of rain. Also a track that, because the cars go around so quickly, even if it does rain on Saturday night and the track is relatively green for Sunday, that track will rubber in pretty quickly. The Red Bull Ring does get used quite regularly as well. So I don't think we're going to have grip issues around the circuit, and I think tyre degradation should be okay. I think a lot of the drivers will go out in the hard compound tyre, and I'm talking about dry conditions, go out in the hard compound tyre, and then perhaps maybe even do 2 runs in the hard compound tyre, go into the medium compound tyre. All depends on what their radar say in terms of weather, and some might be brave enough to go on the soft compound tyre to try and get track position early on, all depending on how they qualify. Last year, we saw some fantastic racing. We saw in the sprint race Max Verstappen, but in the main race, Ferrari just came to light, and Charles Leclerc pitted later, overtook Max on a number of occasions. It was a fantastic race for Ferrari, except for Carlos Sainz, if you remember. Unfortunately, his engine expired and actually turned into quite a fire as well. Ferrari will be hoping that whatever they learnt from Canada, as well as they've done a 100-kilometer promo time at Fiorano, testing a whole lot of new parts, although Fiorano is completely different in terms of its setup to the Red Bull Ring, they'll be hoping that they will find some solutions. We're expecting a new front wing, a new engine cover, and perhaps new side pods on the Ferrari this coming weekend. All in all, it's all about trying to beat Red Bull at their home Grand Prix and to try and beat Max Verstappen. 6 out of 8 so far. The other 2 victories have gone to his teammate Sergio Perez. That makes it 8 out of 8. And nobody knows what would have happened at Emilia-Romagna in Imola had that race taken place. Anyway, it's going to be fantastic. We've got all of the TV times for you for this weekend. Just remember that tomorrow we've got 1:30 to 2:30 is free practice. Qualifying for Sunday's race is from 5 o'clock through until 6 o'clock in the evening. Then the sprint shootout is basically a qualifying session from 12 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. 4:30 to roughly 5 o'clock will be the sprint race. It'll be to about 5:30. And then, of course, on Sunday, the main race, 71 laps around the Österreich Ring, the Red Bull Ring, that takes place at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Do I predict that anybody will beat Max Verstappen? I don't know. Although, home race for him, huge Dutch crowd. I don't think he needs any more inspiration or motivation to go out there and win. Whatever it is, I know it's going to be a fabulous race. Enjoy it, and we'll see you next week, because next weekend is the British Grand Prix. Until then, let's go racing.